good morning from the KarenKave. Today I've got a special guest with me. This is my son, Jonathan, and today we are going to take that wonderful fig jam and we're going to put it on some Southern Buttermilk Biscuits. These are the biscuits you've been waiting for. These are the biscuits that were shown in the special TV debut that aired on the Tar Heel Traveler that I made. So I have the expert with me. Yes, I make my own. I make them pretty much like Jonathan, but Jonathan makes them exactly how Grandma Lee made them. And Grandma Lee goes way back in years in making these for our family. Every Sunday we'd go to her house and we'd have Sunday dinner, and there was always the wooden bowl with the biscuits, and she would just make them, and she had her little pan. And so I'm going to let Jonathan take you through exactly how she made them. I make them just a little bit different, but pretty much the same. I just have a little bit different technique at the very end. So Jonathan, where do we start? We start with really good flours, from what I understand that you've always told me. Tell me about the flour that you use.
Yeah, so you want flour, self-rising flour, and you want something that's soft winter wheat. So I use Southern biscuit flour, and the reason you want that as opposed to hard wheat is it makes a fluffier biscuit. It's closer to what you would use, say, for different types of pastries. So self-rising, soft winter wheat. White Lily is another good brand, but I like Southern biscuit, and I do not get the, they have some complete or different formulations where it actually has the fat incorporated in, so like flake butter, things like that, but I just get the regular self-rising. So we just start out, kind of eyeball a couple cups of flour, and I usually kind of fluff up the flour in the bag, so you don't end up having, real settled out clumps.
He makes it sound so easy. But in reality, once you do it and you do it over and over and you practice, you get the hang of it. It's not really that hard.
So we'll
okay,
start
so
there.
now what are you adding to it?
So we're gonna add lard. If you don't like the taste of lard, you could use another fat like butter, shortening. So I use about the size of an egg, I'd say kind of a generous size there, and then what I'll do from there is take the lard, and you're basically just going to pull flakes with flour on your hand from that piece of lard and flake it right into the flour there. And if you were using butter, of course it's going to be chilled. You don't want to use room temperature. You want to keep it as cold as possible. And you would use a pastry blender to incorporate your butter, or I've used a cheese grater in the past as well. Works out pretty well. But for the lard, you could use a pastry blender. I prefer just to flake it in like this, and what you're looking for is less than a pea size piece of lard. So you can see some of these flakes here end up being flat, and we're just going to kind of incorporate those and make sure they're well distributed.
Lard is such an old-fashioned word. A lot of people don't even know where to buy it. And where can you pick up lard?
So most times you can find it in the grocery store. I think some have dropped it from their shelves recently. Some of the butcher shops now are actually carrying them, or carrying lard. So leaf lard may be a term that you hear, and that's a pretty good quality lard. You'll generally find it in a tub like that. Sometimes now in the international sections you can find it by the Hispanic foods as well. So we're just going to use buttermilk, full fat buttermilk. If you don't have buttermilk, you can do the vinegar and milk trick. It doesn't turn out quite the same, so I would suggest just getting buttermilk. So what we're going to do is get the flour just kind of into a well here, and then pour a little bit in, and the objective here is to just bring the dough together without getting it sticky. So you can see I'm just kind of tossing the flour in with the buttermilk, and then we'll just kind of repeat that process. And you want to go slow with the buttermilk so you have some control over how saturated that dough's ending up. So what you're looking for is a dough that is fairly saturated but is also not sticky on the exterior, and you'll see what I'm getting at here in a minute. Another point of note, you don't want to overwork this dough, so you'll get mixed opinions on should you roll out the dough, cut it. The method that I prefer and what Grandma used was this method here, and you'll see what we're going to do is basically just form a kind of a log of dough towards the end of the process here, and we'll pull the biscuits off of that, pinch them off of the log of dough here. So we're going to be extra careful not to deflate the dough, press it down, or Grandma would say to bruise the dough.
What I love about this type of cooking is it's all done by eye. We don't have a measuring cup here. It's just kind of look and feel. And my grandfather, that was the chef, he did a lot of his recipes that way as well.
So I tend to add just a little bit of flour in the bowl there to the side. Again, not wanting anything to stick really, so I'll just kind of pull that dry flour in while I'm still trying to get the dough to come together, to keep it from adhering to the bowl, to my fingers, and keeping the exterior, again, not real saturated, but you can see the middle of the dough is going to get pretty saturated. And it's all right if you end up having some pieces that really don't pull together with the rest of the dough. It's perfectly fine. You want the majority of it to kind of group together, but again, if you end up having some that it doesn't, wouldn't worry about it too much.
So the difference in what I do and what Jonathan does is he rolls his into a log and he has it lightly coated already. I take the mixture in a very saturated form and I scoop it out. I actually use an ice cream scooper, and then I put it into a bowl with some Southern Biscuit self-rising flour and toss it in between my hands. And that way the saturated dough is coated with that light bit of flour on it, and then I put them onto the pan. And you can see that Jonathan is starting to put those on his pan.
So what we'll do here is we're just going to continuously pull that big log of dough kind of to a point and pinch the very end off into what probably appears to some folks to be kind of a smaller biscuit, but again, these are going to rise and expand quite a bit, and these have never been what a lot of folks would call a cat head biscuit. Grandma's were generally a little bit smaller, real fluffy. So we'll line those up, and you want them just barely touching. You want to give them something to grab to while they rise. And usually that's going to be one another and the sides of the pan. And as I pull it off, you can see that dough is pretty saturated, so I just give it a quick little toss in the extra flour. And then I look for whatever the smoothest side is, pat it down, again, kind of gentle, not looking to really deflate or overwork the dough.
So what Jonathan's doing there is he's giving it that extra coat at the end, and that's exactly what I'll do. Is I take mine, and it's a little bit more saturated than the log that he's rolled, but again, I just scoop it out and I put it into a bowl with some self-rising flour, take it between my two hands and toss it, so there's that nice light coating on the top. And I believe that the reason we want to have that nice coating on the top, Jonathan, is to keep that moisture in, to keep it to keep the saturated part nice and moist, so when it's cooking, that stays inside. Is that right?
Right, and it'll also aid. We'll get to the final step here. If you got a lot of your saturated dough exposed on the top, you'll get kind of a little bit of a jagged finish to it, so to speak, or the exterior is going to be a little rougher than what you look for. And we're also going to follow these up with a little pat of water towards the end of this process, just to smooth those tops.
Those are looking really good. Grandma be proud of you.
And you'll note as I go, again, just looking for the smooth side and not looking to overwork that dough.
We've got the chamber stove all heating up. To what temperature are you cooking these at, Jonathan?
So I usually like 450, 475. Some folks will go 500 on them. The idea is you don't want to go really much lower than 450. And sometimes it depends on, if I do decide I want to go with a little bit of a bigger biscuit, I will increase the temperature. The objective is to get them to rise real quick and get them to cook through as quick as possible so they don't start to dry out. So if you go much below 450, in my experience, what you'll find is that it takes them a little bit longer to cook, and that's going to result in a real kind of crispy biscuit on the exterior, and it's going to be fairly dried out and dense on the inside as well. So again, anywhere, kind of a preference. It's one of those points of debate, but I'll say as a general rule of thumb, you're going to look for between 450 and 500. So we've got a pan here, and
Oh, there was always one left over, and what would Grandma do with that?
I eat it.
She'd leave it
do with
laying
it
on
as
the
you will.
store and on the top of her counter, and somebody would grab it and eat it.
So then we're just going to take some cool water. We're going to pat the tops here, give it just a second to soak in. And the idea here, so twofold. One, you'll see we'll come back and smooth these tops out, and that'll keep from, you can see there's a couple spots here where I've got imperfections in the tops in terms of cracks, and that's really, one, kind of a cosmetic thing, but will release a little bit of the moisture from the inside of the biscuit as it cooks. The second thing that this accomplishes is introduces a little more humidity into the oven right there at the beginning, which also aids in the dough rising and having a real tender biscuit. So we're just going to pull together any seams that you see that are still open here. Get those guys smoothed off, and this was a step that Grandma did not skip. I think she was pretty particular about having a biscuit that was pleasing to the eye.
She'd take her knuckles and push them down.
Yeah.
She liked her food to look pretty when she presented it to somebody.
So we'll get these smoothed off.
Okay, let's get these wrapped up, and then we will put them in the chambers, so stand by.
All right, so we're going to put them in. Again, we're going at 450 today. Put them in the middle of the oven, and you'll just have to kind of keep an eye on them. They do tend to cook pretty quick in general, so I'm going to say somewhere, I never really time it, I just look at them. Generally about 10 minutes or so, you want to start checking for them to start to brown up, and then we're actually going to put them under the broiler real quick to give it a little bit of a crisper top and get a little deeper brown color on the top. That was something that Grandma would do in the electric oven towards the end, is just turn that broiler on real quick.
All right, right, so stand by for the biscuits to come out of the oven and we'll throw them up on the broiler on the chamber stove.
Alright, so we're going to get them out and put them under this broiler. Usually once you start smelling them, they're getting pretty close. Set them on that broiler real quick. I'll go just a little lower on that guy. And we're just looking to just brown that top a little bit more without drying them out in the oven. And you can skip this step if you prefer just a lighter brown top. These are getting just a little crisper top. So like I said, we don't want to go too far on these guys, so we'll keep a close eye on them.
So if you have a broiler in your oven, it's just a matter of turning your broiler on while your biscuits are in there and just topping them off on the top, right? I mean, the chamber stove is a little bit different. Everybody doesn't have a broiler like that, but that broiler does well.
If you've got an oven at home, an electric oven where you can look into it, it's actually a little bit of an easier process because you can watch and monitor when they start getting burnt in the oven. You don't have to open it up and release any of that humidity in there, and you can just turn the broiler on high. And again, you're just looking to get just a little extra brown on the top, and you're speeding the browning process without drying out the inside of the biscuit. So we're almost there. Turn that broiler up just a little more.
So really, maybe just 5 to 6 minutes underneath that broiler and then they're done.
And again, every oven's going to be a little bit different.
What's nice about that is if you take out those biscuits and you want to make some pancakes, you've got a whole place right there to make your pancakes on your griddle.
That's right.
Somebody was thinking when they made that stove. And what you want to always remember to do is to watch them. How many times did Grandma burn them?
Yeah, especially in the broiling stage, you can take a real good batch of biscuits and burn them and have something that's not what you were shooting for. So during the baking process, again, I kind of, about 10 minutes start looking at them. Generally, you're going to smell like any other baked good. When you start smelling it, it's getting close to being done. But especially during the broiler process, you want to keep a close eye on them so you don't lose them. We're almost there. Give them just a minute more here.
Take a close-up look when they come out of there. And then we're going to try some of this homemade fig jam, and also we're going to dump some blueberry syrup on them.
I'm going to call those good. That's a little bit on the lighter side. So again, preference wise, you can go darker or lighter. I'm going to call those good for now.
Well, there's Grandma's biscuits for you, and they sure are beautiful. So let's, how about we just take one off and just crack it open, and we can just show them how nice and crispy they are in the middle. You can just see, you can actually see the steam still coming, but if you can see how beautiful those look in the middle. You got your crispy hard top, but you've got your nice moist in the middle. So we're going to take some that homemade fig jam that we just made a couple days ago. You can watch the video out on my YouTube channel. Whoop! Hot. And let's pour some of this beautiful jam over it. So there you go, and that's the fig jam, and of course we want to take some beautiful blueberry syrup that we made and just dump some of that right on there. Homemade never looks so good, does it?
Looks good.
Yeah. Thank you for joining me and my guest Jonathan today, and I hope you'll give them a try. They look harder than you think, but they're really easier than you think. So good luck, and thanks for joining me. Don't forget to subscribe to my page and come back for some more homemade goodness. Okay.
You want a biscuit, buddy?
Come get a biscuit. Don't they look